The hand slammed into Bruce Lee's shoulder. The crowd gasped. Dozens of witnesses pulled back, forming a ring around the confrontation. Festival lanterns swayed overhead, casting restless shadows across the cobblestones of Grant Avenue. The smell of incense and fried dumplings hung thick in the night air. Kenny Lau sneered and pushed harder. Bruce didn't flinch. His feet stayed rooted. His body absorbed the force like water taking in a stone. No retaliation. No anger flashing across his face, just stillness. Kenny's smile widened. He mistook control for weakness. Two more men closed in from the sides. Billy Wong on the left, shoulders squared. Albert Chan on the right, fists already clenched. 3 against 1, the mathematics of violence tilted in their favor, and they knew it. Behind Bruce, an elderly woman trembled. Mrs. Huang clutched her cloth bag to her chest, pressed against a vendor's stall with nowhere to run. Bruce's eyes held steady on Kenny, dark, unblinking, measuring. The festival music stopped. Someone in the crowd whispered his name. The air crackled with anticipation, thick as summer lightning, waiting to ignite. Kenny wound up for another shove, and that's when everything began to unravel. Minutes earlier, Bruce had walked through a different Grant Avenue. Red lanterns swayed overhead, casting shifting shadows across cobblestones slick with spilled tea. The scent of roasted duck and incense hung thick in the festival air. Children darted between vendor stalls while erhu music spiraled through the crowd. Laughter, voices bargaining in Cantonese, the pulse of celebration. Bruce moved through the press of bodies, hands relaxed at his sides. Then he saw them. 3 men had backed an elderly woman against a vegetable cart. The vendor looked away. So did the families nearby. Kenny Lau leaned close, his palm open, demanding. Mrs. Huang clutched her embroidered purse, trembling. The crowd had formed a circle, but no one stepped forward. Bruce's stride changed, not faster, smoother. He flowed between shoulders and shopping bags like water finding its path through stone. No one noticed him moving until he was already there, positioned directly between the 3 men and the woman. His voice cut through the festival noise, calm and clear in Cantonese. "Leave her alone." Kenny Lau turned. His eyes widened, then narrowed. Recognition sparked behind the sneer forming on his lips. But what Kenny saw in Bruce's steady gaze made something shift in the air around them. Kenny's eyes narrowed with recognition. His lips curled into a sneer that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Wait, I know you." He jabbed a finger toward Bruce's chest. "You're that guy from the newspapers. The kung fu teacher in Oakland." Billy Wong shifted his weight, glancing sideways at Albert Chan. Both men stood straighter, trying to mirror Kenny's bravado. "What, you going to kung fu us?" Kenny's voice climbed louder, playing to the crowd now pressing closer from all sides. The scent of incense from a nearby vendor thickened the air between them. Billy's laugh came out sharp and hollow. Albert followed, the sound dying in his throat when Bruce's expression remained unchanged, calm, centered like still water before a stone drops. "I'm asking you nicely to leave." Bruce's words carried no anger, no threat, just certainty. "That's your first chance." The crowd inched forward, shoulders brushed shoulders, whispers rippled outward in Cantonese and English. Few could understand what it felt like to stand between violence and its target, knowing words might not be enough. Kenny's jaw tightened, his hands flexed at his sides. The festival music seemed distant now, swallowed by the weight of what hung unspoken between them. Would restraint hold, or would pride demand blood? Kenny's eyes swept Bruce from head to toe. The math was simple. He stood 3 inches taller. Billy and Albert both outweighed this newspaper legend by 30 pounds. "He's smaller than all of us." Kenny's voice pitched louder for the crowd. "What's he going to do?" The question hung like bait. Billy shifted left. Albert drifted right. Their boots scraped pavement as they widened the net. The circle tightened. Mrs. Huang's shallow breathing rasped behind Bruce's shoulder. Bruce's chest rose, fell, rose again. The rhythm never changed. "I'm giving you a second chance." His words carried no heat, just certainty. "Walk away now." Kenny's grin spread wider. Stillness meant fear, didn't it? The crowd always fled or fought. This was surrender dressed as control. He read hesitation in that calm voice, weakness in those relaxed hands. The murmurs rippled through the witnesses. Someone coughed. Fabric rustled as bodies pressed closer. The scent of incense from a nearby vendor mixed with sweat and anticipation. Kenny's weight shifted forward onto his toes. His right arm lifted, slowly, deliberately. The space between them collapsed to inches, then his palm drove toward Bruce's shoulder. Kenny's palm struck Bruce's shoulder. The impact rippled through muscle and bone, but Bruce's feet remained planted on the pavement. His body absorbed the force like water receiving a stone. No stumble, no retreat. The festival noise seemed to drain away, replaced by the sharp intake of breath from 100 watching mouths. "Last chance," Bruce said. His voice carried no anger, just certainty. The words fell between them like stones into still water. Kenny's lips curled. The smaller man wasn't fighting back, wasn't even raising his hands. Fear, Kenny decided, had to be fear. He glanced at Billy and Albert, saw their expectant faces, felt the crowd's eyes burning into his back. Sweet incense smoke drifted between the lanterns overhead, mixing with the smell of sweat and anticipation. Kenny shoved again, harder this time, leaning his full weight forward. Bruce absorbed it, again, still rooted, still calm. The crowd leaned closer, bodies pressing against each other. Mrs. Huang's trembling hand clutched her bag tighter. Somewhere a child whispered a question that went unanswered. The tension stretched like wire pulled to its breaking point, ready to snap. Then Bruce's weight shifted, just slightly, almost imperceptibly downward. And Kenny realized something that made his pulse spike. Time slowed, the festival noise, the drums, the laughter, the crackling lanterns collapsed into silence. Kenny pulled his arm back, shoulder rotating, elbow cocking, weight shifting to his rear foot. Bruce's left heel pressed into the pavement. Imperceptible, his hips sank 2 inches lower. The crowd stopped breathing. Mrs. Huang's knuckles whitened around the leather handles of her bag. Her lips moved in silent prayer. Billy Wang's eyes darted to the alley exit. Albert Chan swallowed. The sound carried. Bruce's fingers uncurled at his sides. Loose, ready, like water waiting to flow. Kenny's face twisted, rage and certainty colliding. He committed forward. The space between them hummed with invisible pressure. A child in the crowd tugged his mother's sleeve. She didn't notice. Someone's watch ticked, once, twice. Bruce's gaze never left Kenny's center, but something shifted in his stance, a coiling, a gathering. Kenny's arm launched forward, full force, full weight, no hesitation. The moment split open. Bruce moved, not away, not back, into the energy rushing toward him, and what happened next defied every instinct the crowd thought they understood about violence. Bruce's hand rose, a whisper of motion. His palm met Kenny's incoming fist at the wrist, circular, yielding, not stopping the force, guiding it. The momentum that Kenny had poured into the strike became a river diverted. Bruce's body pivoted, hips turning, and suddenly Kenny was lurching forward into empty air where Bruce's face had been a heartbeat before. Kenny's boots scraped concrete, his arms windmilled. The weight he'd committed to the punch betrayed him now, dragging him 3 stumbling steps past where Bruce had stood. The smell of spilled noodles from a nearby cart mixed with Kenny's sharp exhale of surprise. Bruce repositioned. 1 foot back, weight settled, hands open at his sides, fingers relaxed, nothing closed into fists, nothing coiled to strike. Yet every person watching understood what they were seeing. A door had opened. Bruce could walk through it any time he chose. Kenny caught himself against a vendor's table, rattling paper lanterns overhead. He straightened slowly, breathing hard. His knuckles were unmarked. No pain bloomed across his jaw. He'd been thrown off balance by his own force, redirected like water around stone. The crowd pressed closer, sensing the invisible shift. Kenny's eyes swept the witnesses. His jaw worked as if tasting something bitter. Then his hand moved to his back pocket. What he pulled free made Mrs. Huang gasp. Kenny's hand emerged clutching a folded newspaper. his last desperate prop for intimidation. Bruce's voice cut through the festival noise, sharp and unmistakable. He spoke first in Cantonese, each syllable carrying across the circle of witnesses like a bell. Then English, louder. "I've given you 3 chances to leave peacefully. You've chosen escalation. What happens next is your choice." The crowd pressed tighter, every face turned toward Kenny, the weight of their attention crushed heavier than any fist. Kenny's jaw clenched, his eyes darted left. Billy and Albert had already stepped back. Right, an elderly man watched with arms crossed. Forward, Bruce stood motionless, hands open, utterly composed. The math changed. Attacking now painted him villain before 100 witnesses. "Not worth it," Kenny muttered. He shoved past Billy. Albert followed. Their footsteps faded into the distant drums and laughter of Grant Avenue. Silence bloomed where violence had waited. Mrs. Huang's trembling hand steadied against her chest. The smell of incense and roasted chestnuts drifted back into awareness. A young man near the front, narrow shoulders, wire-rimmed glasses, stepped forward. "Why didn't you fight?" The question hung between them like a challenge and an invitation. Bruce turned toward the voice, and what he said next would reshape how an entire community understood strength. Bruce turned from the dispersing troublemakers to Mrs. Huang. His hand found her elbow, steadying the tremor in her arm. She clutched her bag against her chest, breathing shallow. The young man's question hung unanswered in the festival air. Bruce faced the gathered witnesses, his voice carried clearly across the circle, because teaching them that violence has consequences without actually being violent is more effective than beating them. Someone shifted closer, others lined in. "They'll remember someone stood up without hurting them." He paused, letting the words settle. "That lesson lasts longer than a broken nose." An older man nodded slowly. A woman whispered to her husband in Cantonese. The crowd's energy shifted, not disappointment, but something heavier, consideration. Mrs. Huang bowed slightly, murmuring gratitude Bruce didn't acknowledge. She disappeared into the festival throng. The witnesses lingered. A teenager watched Bruce with new eyes. The young man who'd asked the question stood motionless, mouth slightly open. Then they scattered. By midnight, the story moved through dim-sum restaurants and mahjong parlors. By dawn, it reached Oakland. A young man named George Lin heard 3 different versions before breakfast, each one amplifying what restraint looked like when backed by absolute capability. But none of them knew what Bruce Lee himself would make of the legend beginning to form around him. 3 years had passed. George Lin's bare feet whispered across the polished wood floor of Bruce's Oakland school. The sharp scent of liniment oil clung to the practice mats. Afternoon light slanted through high windows, catching dust motes suspended in stillness. Bruce demonstrated a deflection technique, slow, deliberate. George mirrored the movement. "I was there that day," George said, resetting his stance. Grant Avenue, the festival. Bruce's eyebrow lifted slightly. "You could have destroyed those guys." George's voice carried the weight of realization. Everyone expected it, wanted it even. Bruce adjusted George's elbow position. "And what did you learn instead?" George exhaled. "That most martial arts teachers show you how powerful they are by hurting people." He met Bruce's gaze. "You showed us how powerful you were by protecting someone without hurting anyone." The words hung between them like a completed circle. Bruce nodded once. Real mastery isn't about proving strength, it's about choosing wisely when to use it. Outside, car horns echoed down the street. Inside, the lesson continued. Not with fists or fury, but with the patient unfolding of understanding. That festival day had planted a seed in George. Others, too. A generation learning that true power wore the face of restraint. That wisdom could strike harder than any fist. The legacy lived in every student who chose to protect rather than dominate.